Friends, I cannot keep up with the pace of change that is today. You see, back in the day, when you needed a car to cart around the wife or the Rugrats, you bought something like this. Then the 90s rolled around and everyone needed an SUV. Then that didn't work and everyone needed a crossover. Then that didn't work and everyone needed a crossover that was fancy. Now, fast forward to today, no one wants any of that. They want a crossover that's fancy, built by a fancy car company that needs to look good. So, it's filthy. So let's put this aside and drive something that's a fancy crossover built by a fancy car company that even I have to admit looks kind of cool. So I'm just going to throw this right out there. You are going to experience deja vu exactly twice in this episode. Let's start with the first. 2-liter inline direct injected 4-cylinder turbocharged gasoline engine. If that doesn't jog your memory, how about this? 228 horsepower. Still a little foggy? Then try this. 258 pounds of torque, comes in at 1,450 RPM. If that doesn't ring a bell, then perhaps this will. Anything you want as long as it's an 8-speed automatic. Now, if you're still not there, then try this. The power, it goes to either the front wheels or all 4 wheels. If you're still not with me, then here's the giveaway. The engine, it doesn't go this way. It goes this way. This, friends, is a very small baby buggy by BMW. In terms of pulling power, which is really what we're dealing with here, this does not feel like a BMW. This feels like a small crossover, which is what it's designed to be. So if we're looking for power, it's got power for the segment, but when you drive a BMW, you generally don't expect torque steer. And if I'm putting my foot into this around some of these turns, you get a little bit of torque steer. Now, does that really impact the people who will be buying this type of vehicle? Not at all. But now here's a scenario that would come up rather frequent with a prudent, practical baby buggy, and that is traffic. So we'd want to understand what passing power is like. So pretty clear out here. And let's do a safe pass, put our foot into it. And this is where the torque comes in. Like, I don't have to bury my foot into the pedal. That's where, frankly, 260 pounds of torque pays off out of a BMW engine as opposed to a Nissan engine with a CVT. And now for something completely different, what this thing is made of. And it's where the BMW group is really no different than, say, Volkswagen or Volvo, in that they're building a lot of cars off of, say, 2 or 3 different platforms. And the concept really is very simple. Use the same tools to build the same size cars or cars focused in the same segment. Great example is like the Golf and the A3 built on the MQB platform. In the BMW world, it's called UKL, and there are 2 other cars that are built on it. That's the Mini Countryman, which you and I have driven together. And then there's the BMW X1, and that's kind of the elephant in the room, because what the hell's the difference? They kind of do the same thing. They're both utility vehicles. Well, the answer is twofold. There's numbers, and then there's things you don't see. In the numbers department, the wheelbase on the X2 is 105.1 inches. That's a full 3 inches shorter than the X1 on which it's based. The length is 172.2, so that's the less utility. But then the stuff you don't see, that's like the design trick. Tumble home, which is the angle of the side glass, the greenhouse we talk about. Instead of it being like this on an X1, it's like this on an X2, and that's why it looks sportier. Then there's the angle of the windshield. On an X1, it's kind of steep, and an X2, it's like this. Again, to make it look sporty, and you can't really point out what it is. The overall impact is it's a bit smaller, but the weight is kind of the same because it's built off the same platform and uses the same bits underneath, like the 18-inch wheels, struts in the front, and multi-link in the back. So it's 3,662 pounds. So let's put all that together and see how it impacts the driving dynamics. As the road gets a lot prettier, let's try this trick again, put our foot into it. Bit of a dip as well as a sweep to the right. There's no float. If you were to try that even in a GLA, it wouldn't end up well for you. Where this, you can tell someone from the Roundel has been working on this, but let me show you one of the drawbacks even with the Roundel on the hood and the steering wheel. Put our foot into it where we should not. And if you try to disturb the plane of motion, things don't go well. Like very quick course corrections, that's not what this thing is about. And usually most BMWs, even a 7 Series, is really good at that. Not this, and I think that's a huge function of the design of the platform. I must say, even though the engine is going in the wrong direction, there is great high-speed stability. It's a conundrum of sorts. It's not at all what you expect. I think that's the big takeaway in terms of driving dynamics in an X2, in that if you're expecting a full-on BMW, I think there's disappointment. If you're expecting a better small crossover, then your expectations are level set. Okay, I know it's going to be incredibly hard to do, but let's take our eyes off the stunning scenery and focus on the interior. Couple of notes. So this very much has a familial look on the inside. It's just the size and the proportions have been changed. Like you look at this dash and it's the design that has cascaded from the 7 Series down to here. And it's just smaller, meaning it's not as wide, and the proportions have changed. Like this UX screen, as well as all of this here, is physically smaller to fit in the physically smaller car. But overall, I have to say, the adaptation works quite well. The thing I'm having some hard time getting used to is having the console way down here. Like in BMWs, I'm used to them like way up here. And I love that, like you are sitting in the car, not on the car. And then last but not least, the tactile feel. Translated, is it a BMW on the inside? Not just how it looks, but how it feels, the pieces that are put together. And here, even though the equation is different, the way it drives, the direction of the engine, the way the power is derived, it's still very much a BMW, which is why it costs what it does. The parts look like they come from other BMWs. Great example is the headliner. It looks like it comes from Munich, not from some nondescript car factory in Alabama or Georgia. And kind of the upshot here is it's cohesive. Is it an exciting place to be? Not at all. But is it cohesive? Does it fit in with the Roundel? Yeah. Is it an M5? Absolutely not. So yeah, let's start with a simple answer. It works. It's a small crossover, it's very attractive, and it's rather fancy. After all, it's got a porcelain Roundel on it. But beyond that, I'm confused, and I fully admit that I am not the intended market for this thing, but where I have a problem is the car you and I drove today, the way it was equipped, $50,000 US. Even the most basic one with front-wheel drive, $38,000 US. So I immediately start thinking, what else could I get for that money? And granted, I am broken, I have a penchant for rear drive cars, so I immediately think for a couple grand more, one could have an E-Class. Hell, one could have a 5 Series, granted not an M550, but a 5 Series. But okay, we're talking about crossovers here, then you immediately think about the XC60. For a little bit less money, one could have a probably more attractive car in the XC60, at least the interior, and dynamically they drive about the same. But really what's going on here is there's a lesson, and the lesson is handed down from the X6, which was handed down to the GLE Coupe, and now into a totally new segment, and that a utility with less utility does indeed work, but it's been only proven at 80 or 100 grand. Does it work at 50 grand or 40 grand? And there's a trick here I've yet to tell you about. You look at an X1, it's got an A, a B, a C, and a D pillar, meaning there's glass in the back utility area. But in this, it only has an A, B, and a C pillar, and then the Roundel and the C pillar, which is another reason why it looks sporty and kind of a lineage to an X6 or a GLE Coupe. So yes, dynamically and as a small crossover, it works. But I'm going to turn this around to you, and I'm specifically looking for people that have a family, so more prudent than me. And what would you choose in this area? If you're looking for a small crossover that's sort of sporty and somewhat fancy, would you choose this? Why? And if you wouldn't choose this, why not? And what would you choose? What region of the world do you hail from? And most importantly, do you have kids and how old are they? Let me know in the comments below or via our social media, MotoManTV all one word, MotoManTV all one word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, I feel I've been incredibly prudent for you guys today, so I have earned some time behind the wheel of this M550. So, until I see you next time, bis später.